New podcast in the description. Similar to the East preview, did a little West preview. No specific standings predictions, though. Spoke on The Sopranos after finishing that show and then compared it to some of my favorite shows ever. Now we talk about Kevin Love, who might be the Cavaliers' favorite player ever. Other than, a couple other guys, of course. Because they re-signed him to a pretty hefty deal. And there was some commotion on whether they were actually going to sign him, trade him. I suggested the idea of trading him, and I still think that would make some sense, but it seems like they are now committing to Kevin Love a bit. And I think the rationale here is to give Colin Sexton a real player to help him out and not just have a bunch of middling guys who are not going to make his day that much easier. On top of banking on Kevin Love being a better player now that he's the number one option. Perhaps Minnesota Kevin Love coming back. And then I do think the opportunity for trading him is still a real thing. So let's talk about all this. Can you argue that trading Kevin Love for young pieces would make more sense for Cleveland in the long term? Yes, mainly because, one, they don't have a whole lot of young assets, but they do have some stuff. They have Cedi Osman, Ante Zizic, Sexton, of course, but also because of their protected first-round pick, right? Where if they finish bottom 10, they get it, and if it's outside of that, it goes to Atlanta. There's a chance Kevin Love just makes them too good, especially if Kevin Love is going to be this close to Minnesota Kevin Love, who was still a pretty damn good player. I mean, I don't know if he's going to put up 25 and 14 and whatever the hell it was a few years ago, but maybe it's something to the effect of like 22 points and 12 rebounds, and his playmaking is more of a thing where he'll have, more rolls to the basket, more pops, and also he can post up and you can have actual offense off of that. I mean, he was like one of the better passers in the league, at least from the big man spot, before he ended up with LeBron, and then he just had to sit in the corner all day long, right? And given that his game is not really reliant on athleticism that much, you could argue that it'll allow him to age a little better. And we have seen with the Cavaliers that when LeBron is gone, it was pretty bad, A lot of revenue gone for the city, for the team. And given that this team has had some draft picks that have not always totally gone well, mainly the Anthony Bennett one, and, trading for Kevin Love fell into their lap because of LeBron. But before that, they would have drafted Wiggins, and Wiggins is not really totally ended up being the best. Maybe they look at this and they go, you know what, let's just guarantee ourselves a good player, and we can just bank on Colin Sexton's improvement. And then if we can, maybe get something out of Rodney Hood and whatever else, then maybe we could be in a position to trade for some other player or players down the road to where before you know it, like Kevin Love's holding on, Sexton's good, a couple other guys end up, they find some diamonds in the rough or whatever. And then this team could be like a top tier team in the Eastern Conference. I have to assume that is their thinking with this, because if they didn't believe they could do that, then it would make more sense to just bottom out, right? And another thing we should look at is the Cleveland contracts. They will have some money to play with in a little bit here, because both J.R. Smith and George Hill's contracts are partially guaranteed. I assume you let both of them go if they're both on the roster. I mean, I could picture either one of them being moved for something, I guess. I don't really know what their value is at this point, but if you let George Hill go and you let J.R. Smith go, then I think you're looking at about mid-70s in salary. And I also think Kyle Korver's contract has some sort of partial guarantee on it as well. So that gives you money to play with. And so then you're in a position to actually go for something in free agency. We remember that the salary cap is going up after this season to a projected $109 million. So then I think Cleveland becomes real players, because if Kevin Love's legit, if Sexton is maybe better than your average rookie or at least pretty decent, then perhaps that's enough to attract one really good player, maybe two pretty solid players, and then from there, if Osman ends up being better than we expect, or Zizic ends up being better than we expect, then suddenly it's like, you got something. Like, is that a title contender? Probably not. I mean, I guess it would depend if something really crazy happened with the free agent they signed, but that's still like a pretty decent team that could maybe approach 45 to 50 wins. I think Ty Lue as the head coach is maybe not the best thing in the world. But hey, given that the Eastern Conference has been pretty rough for, a while, and it seems like it's, still going to be that. Even if the top of the conference is improving, there's still a lot of rough stuff at the bottom. So if you're going for wins, then you can just kind of get yourself to high 40s by just being decent, I would say. And I think a good reason to do this if you're the Cavs, and I think this goes back to just how it's been without LeBron, I can understand the rationale in saying, you know what, LeBron is gone, let's just be decent for a while, okay? Because we've already seen the other side of this. I mean, just because you're bad does not guarantee that you're going to grow out of being bad. We've seen it with the Magic, we've seen it with the Kings, we've seen it with the Knicks, other teams that I can't think of, but it happens a lot where just because you're getting those high draft picks does not guarantee that you're just going to climb out of it in a couple years as if this is like, my GM mode or whatever. So just being guaranteed a good team, or what Cleveland hopes to be a good team, there's probably a better chance of that happening 2 years from now than this season coming up. I mean, there is value in that, right? Could sell some Kevin Love jerseys, sell Colin Sexton jerseys, and then once again, hoping the team's good and all that. Now, I guess another thing to look at is the potential of a Kevin Love trade, right? Because the way this contract is structured, it's not just $30 million a season, it's like it actually kind of descends towards the end of the contract, and I think, given that, again, I think Kevin Love could age pretty okay. He could become a total disaster on defense, but I also think offensively he can maintain himself. Then, with the salary cap going up, I think there's a chance that a $20-something million Kevin Love is not that terrible. You look at a team like the Jazz, right? Maybe in a couple years, they're looking for an offensive jolt to play next to Gobert sometimes. They could play Kevin Love like 23, 24 minutes a game. And they would be willing to make a move like that, right? Or maybe somebody else would be. Now, the reason you would do this if you're the Cavs is if the next couple years just don't go well for whatever reason, you're still bad, and then you could just, you could get some stuff for Love. Now, of course, what you actually get back is probably not going to be as good a couple years from now, but still, I think you're putting yourself in a position where you say, all right, we can go for it right now with Kevin, and if it works out, great, for everything I've said in this video. If it doesn't work out, we can still move a guy who can put up high teens, maybe low 20s in points, and because of the cap going up, and also because his contract goes down a little bit towards the end, it could make sense for some other team to make that trade. But now to go back to the positives, there is a chance that this could open up the possibility of Cleveland like trading for some sort of big-time player in a couple seasons, because NBA stars are becoming available every year now at this point. I mean, we're probably going to see some Jimmy Butler rumors soon enough here. And if the Cavs have built up a team that is like Kevin Love, number one option going well, Sexton, Osman, Zizic, they lure in like at least two pretty good free agents, then you've got some assets, right? And then suddenly, new star NBA player becomes available. You might be able to make a move. I mean, who knows who it'll be? And I mean, we've seen guys move for offers that weren't exactly the best, but contracts and all that. So it makes sense. There's a rationale in it for Cleveland. Now, the negative to all this, the potential negative to all this, is maybe Kevin Love is simply not as good as they hope he is at this point. Maybe he doesn't age that well. Maybe these young guys they have are not really that good. Maybe Kevin Love makes them a little too good, and they either don't get their draft pick this year, they do get it, but it's like the 9th pick, so they, could still get a really good player, but their chances are not as high. That's the worst case scenario, but I do think it's worth if you want to call it a risk, because, again, it's not a guarantee that you're going to hit a home run in the draft just because you're the worst team in the NBA, so yeah, I get the rationale. Anyway, once again, new podcast. Western Conference early preview talk stuff. The Sopranos is my favorite show ever, and that's it.